Friday.
Okay, today is June 29th, 2016. Kay Wagner, Foundation Archivist, is visiting with Dr. Ed Winga, a retired internal medicine physician with a pulmonary disease subspecialty. Dr. Winga obtained his MD from the University of Iowa in 1962. After a rotating internship and service in the U.S. Army, Dr. Winga began a 3-year residency in internal medicine at Parkland Memorial Hospital in Dallas. That was followed by a year of fellowship in pulmonary diseases at Parkland Memorial Hospital and Southwestern Texas Medical School. He joined Gunderson Health System in 1969 and retired in 2009, totaling 40 years of practice.
Yeah.
Did I get that right?
You're right.
Okay. Welcome. Thank you for coming in today and visiting with me. We'll start with your family background. You grew up in a small town in Iowa, and your father owned and operated a family restaurant. Please describe your upbringing and your family history.
Well, I was born in Washington, Iowa, which is about 30 plus miles out of Iowa City, and it's a town of a little over 6,000. And my father owned and operated a family restaurant there, and he actually had come over from Holland at age 4, and it ended up that his father was killed by runaway horses at age 9, and so he ended up trying to take care of the family thereafter and even didn't quite finish high school. But anyway, by the time he got settled on things, he did get into eventually the restaurant business, and then he bought a good, actually, family restaurant in Washington, Iowa. And he met my wife, who was a former school teacher, and they got married, and after that, she went to working in the restaurant along with him, of course. I came along later, and I actually started working in the restaurant at age 10, and before that time and ever there, I had jobs anywhere from 1 to 3 or more, like mowing yards, carrying papers, and raising pedigreed dachshunds. I really liked all that, and my dad was very strict and very fussy about how everything was done. It had to be really done neat, and that carried on through, maybe to me a little bit, but anyway. It ended up my older brother got talked into going to Michigan State University in hotel and restaurant management after he and my dad looked into that. And what my dad wanted was that he had 3 sons. He wanted them all go ahead and do that and all run a restaurant. And well, my brother did that. And then I came along, and my dad was really quite strict, to say the least. And so I couldn't do much to argue with him, and I had to go to Michigan State initially for 2 years in hotel and restaurant management. And I kind of needled him along the way, trying not to upset him too much, but he got really upset with me at the end of about the end of my sophomore year. And then he said, well, oh well, whatever. You can do whatever you want. You're on your own. And I said, well, that's fine. I said I was going to switch and go down to Iowa in medicine. He didn't like that. He was really not a friend for many years. We didn't get along at all, to say the least. And I did go ahead and make the switch. And I was kind of lucky because school had been easy for me. Actually, I ended up valedictorian in my class in high school. So I had no trouble there, and so I could always work on the side, which I did all the time. I always had at least one other job, and it was varied jobs. A lot of them had to do with washing dishes or cleaning up somewhere or waiting on somebody, or various things. What I wanted to do was something I thought was more meaningful, and that's why I ended up going into medicine. I thought that'd be, to me, more rewarding and maybe helpful to others. So I did go down to Iowa, and of course, I did get a scholarship there, just like I got a scholarship going to Michigan State University, and that helped in terms of along the line. And then what happened was that at Iowa, my dad got sick when I was in my junior year of medical school, and ended up getting admitted to University of Iowa hospitals. And I met him there, and we once again became friends, I'd say, which was really an enlightening thing. And it's hard to explain how bad things were for those years. In the interim there too, also, I met my wife-to-be at a summer rotation I was doing up in north of Iowa City at a Mercy hospital in pathology, and she was a nurse there. And then that was when I first met her, between my sophomore and junior years. But then ended up going to Salt Lake City for the internship, and that was good, and I enjoyed that, but it was interrupted by the end where I was going back to Iowa to do a residency in internal medicine. And so I had to cancel that, and then I had to just make a quick trip back home to pick up a little suitcase of stuff, and then went back to California. And this is all on 2 weeks' notice at the end, that I was going to Korea. And they were doing that because that was the end of the 10-year armistice of the Korean War. And at that time they came down and they killed some right by the camp where I was going, up on the DMZ. And so it was really exciting at that time. It was actually written up in the papers in the U.S. for a while there. But I went straight over to Korea via Japan, or Anchorage, up in Alaska too on the way. But it's a long trip, but they tried to teach us a little along the way. It was the first group that really ever bypassed Fort Sam. So I didn't really have any training in the Army. And that was really different. And I found that out after a while, because I didn't know, one thing about another somewhat in that, and this came up in various conversations. One of the best ones was when I was over there and I was outside our aid station, and the general came by in his Jeep, and he sort of saluted me. And I started to salute, but I was my legs were spread, and I brought it up like this, and I thought, oh, that's terrible, so I brought it back down. And he, had his Jeep squeal to a stop, and he jumped out and came across the ditch and came up to me, and he said, "Captain," he said, "that's salute." He said, "Yes, sir." Yeah. That was horrible. He said, "If you're going to do that, I'd just assume you didn't do it at all." Okay, I said, and I turned around and walked away. Well, at that time, I didn't know enough that you don't walk away from a general. And I guess the general stood there for a little while, and then he left. But I think the amazing thing was that he checked on me a lot. But he later, and about 3 or 4 weeks later, picked me as the medical officer for the whole camp, in place of 2 or 3 other physicians that were there. And then I spent the rest of the time there at the general's mess for the rest of my time in Korea. But that was just one interesting little experience. While I was in Korea, though, I met a captain, and he said that he had his family back in Hawaii, and I could go back there, with him at Christmas time. And that's when I got the idea where I'd meet my wife-to-be in Hawaii, and then I would have things a little better set when I came out of Korea. So I went back there at Christmas time, got married, went back to the DMZ. You could not come back to the United States at that time. As far as I could go was Korea. It was to Hawaii from Korea. So I got married and went back to the DMZ, and then came back to, and then oddly enough, I ended up in Fort Sam Houston. I tried to come back to the United States and go someplace where I could ski, because I'd been at Salt Lake City, and I got kind of interested in skiing. That was the only outside activity I had there. And they sent me to Fort Sam, of course. But this was par for the course. And so anyway, and while I was there, I heard from a former classmate of mine that the good place to go for the internal medicine and the rest of it was really in Dallas at Parkland. And so I changed at that time my residency from Iowa to over at Parkland, and ended up going there then the next year. When I got there, they just took down the barriers between the blacks and the whites, and so it was interesting. And it was one of those occasions where you really would like to have a police officer there in the emergency room when you were working and even elsewhere, because I got attacked a number of times while I was there. But my most interesting experience there, which my grandkids have dwelt on, was that Jack Ruby was brought out of jail very late in '66, and he was not doing well. He was put up on the 8th floor of Parkland and given to me, oddly enough. They picked me to take care of him along with the guards. And that was pretty interesting and exciting. And he was what I would call the worst white trash I'd ever seen, and I'd seen plenty down there. Did take care of him, but we didn't try to improve anything much, and he died early in a matter of a few weeks later in '67. But then I think 2 or 3 of my kids all wrote that up, and even a grandkid did too. But anyway, then that's there when I decided to go into pulmonary too, and so I took the extra air one in pulmonary year. And then I had, oddly enough, the position lined up at the University of Iowa. They were going to have me there in pulmonary. And so I'd teach and do some practice. And that's what I planned to do, but I made a trip back up to Iowa at the time before I left Texas. You know, I came up on one trip, and my wife's father said something about this clinic up in La Crosse. You know, he said he thought they had a teaching clinic, you know, or a medical clinic, you know, and it's pretty good. So on a lark, I'd never been to La Crosse before in my life, although I'd been around a lot of other places sort of. So I came up here on a whim and happened to come in there, and Bob Rasmus was there at the time, and talked to him and some others, and I found out about Ed Overholt, and they had a residency program and all this other, and I thought, well, that's pretty good, you know. And so I thought, well, I'd look into that. So I did. It ended up, I went back down to Dallas, and then I checked with someone down there, Dr. Jay Sanford, who was very good in infectious disease and wrote the book on that basically, and he was my go-to guy if I ever had trouble. I didn't bother with anybody else. I'd just call him in the middle of the night or whatever, because we worked basically day and night. It was very common you'd work 40 hours straight, think nothing of it. But I found out later that he did check on Overholt for me, and then Overholt checked with him on me too. So there was back and forth, and so we had communication there. And then I came back up one other time and made a swing around and checked other possible places here in Wisconsin that I might consider, and included Marshfield. But when we went to Marshfield, drove around there, and they had the old clinic at that time. Looked at that, you know, and then the hospital was in another place, and all I can remember is that tumbleweed going down Main Street, and And I asked my wife, I said, would you want to live here? No. And I had to agree. So anyway, I went back and I decided then that I'd switch. And so I called up on Iowa and canceled out there and decided to come up here, which I don't regret at all, because the other thing is I wanted to come back to the Middle West because I thought this is where the nicest people were. And so we lined up to come back up here, and I don't regret that at all. At that time, I had 2 children, and now in a total of, I've got 3, just for interest. My oldest works for Bremer Bank up in Twin Cities, and then my daughter in between works here at the clinic in dietary, and then my youngest son is a civil engineer with the DOT in town here. So that's worked out pretty good. I'd say working here has been really good because I liked everything. I think the thing here, when I came here, I thought I was number 62 for what it's worth, and I guess the other thing is that I thought it went as far as being members recruited was that challenging. I thought it was really fun when I came here because I liked all the communication back and forth, because you met with everybody in a way, and I worked all over the hospital because of what I did in large part, and so that made a difference. Well, you want to know more about in terms of these questions to answer that I've got?
Well, I was curious, going back to, was it a coincidence that your father was admitted to the University of Iowa, or did he come there because he knew you were there?
He came there because he was that sick.
He was that sick, and it just so was coincidental.
Well, he knew I was there.
Yeah.
I mean, he knew I was going to school there and everything, but I think he may have been surprised in a way to meet me too. But then the thing of it is, that's about a little over 30 miles away from home, and they didn't have that much care in hometown, so that was it. So he was admitted up there.
Were any words spoken about sorry, or or any communication back and forth?
No, not really, but we got along okay after
Yeah.
that. It was just one of those things where he realized that medicine wasn't the worst thing in the world, you know. The odd thing too, otherwise, my younger brother became a lawyer. That's a kicker.
Went from the hotel management to law.
Yeah.
And the third brother?
That's the third brother.
That's the third brother.
Yeah. My oldest one ran the restaurant.
Okay.
And he did that until, no, he retired a little younger than I did, but he ran the restaurant, and I went into medicine. My younger brother went to law. Interesting.
Did your wife continue? She was a nurse, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and did she practice nursing?
She did over in Fort Sam, and then she did for about 6 months at Parkland until she had a baby. And then we figured out after she had a baby that it was a lot cheaper if I just would moonlight a little on the side, even though I worked crazy long hours, than for her to work, and then she could take care of the kids. And that's what we went on that premise after that, because all the way through, it's interesting, like I got there, the only time I ever made money was in the service, really. And that wasn't very much, but I mean, when I had an intern, I made $2,000 a year. It wasn't livable even, and I lived, growing up before that, Skid Row housing at times, but anyway. And then when I went into the Army, I made a lot more than that. I mean, I made about $7,000 or something, and then I went to Parkland, $2,000 a year again, on my residency, and I went that way until I think I went up on my third year. I went up to 3,000 maybe, and then I made another 1,000 or so more when I was in pulmonary. But that was it. I never made much, you know. And that's why the interesting thing is too that I could have gone to work down there in Dallas and made 3 times as much as I got coming up here. 3 times.
Wow.
And I didn't care because they offered me, I think, $22,000 here to come. And I thought, I hadn't even been close to any of that before in my life, you know. And I thought, that's good enough for me. And the money wasn't the thing that was really getting me anyway. I was never really that much interested in the money other than getting by. That I was. I was pretty cheap when it came to other things.
Going back to the Ruby story, did you have any interactions with him, or?
Not much.
No.
No, he wouldn't say much, but he was bad.
Yeah. That's very interesting. When I read that about Parkland Hospital, it just, you know, a bell went off, but I didn't associate it with him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was. And why they picked me for sure, I don't know. Other than, I guess they liked me, but then but they did, and they put us up on the 8th floor. Nobody else on the 8th floor, Parkland.
Just him.
Jack and I and the guards. And
Wow.
It was interesting, but a lot of that stuff was interesting down there. It was scary down there too, just for what it's worth. Working at Parkland was.
And that was in Dallas.
Yep.
Yeah, Dallas.
Yeah, that was Southwestern Texas Medical University as well.
What appealed to you about pulmonary medicine?
Well, my thought was on that was that, you know, I figured a lot of things, if people got sick and, you know, and you saw them, that you could look it up in a book, you know. But if they get acutely ill, you don't have time to go look in the book. And so I was interested in this critical care aspect, or people that would get sick all of a sudden. I wanted to be able to handle that. The rest of it, if I had anything really bother about that, I could go look it up in a book. That was my philosophy. And that worked pretty good, you know, because I wanted to be able to take care of the bad stuff, and the rest of the stuff, usually that you had time, I could look it up and find out or do something. But in an emergency, nah, you can't do that.
Are most pulmonary cases at somewhat of an emergency level?
Not necessarily, but I'd say a fair share of mine was. When I came here too, I was available, readily available, and I loved it because here it worked fine because we had this is the first time I met in a long time that the surgeons were really nice here, you know, and I had a lot of interaction with them because they had a lot of bad cases, and I was in the intensive care unit, of course. That was a big thing because the critical care was a biggie, you know, and I wanted to know how to handle that, and I did. And so I'd get calls all the time in terms of that, day and night. But I liked it. It was fun, and it was rewarding too.
What have you seen as the biggest innovation in the field of pulmonary medicine in your career?
Well, the question, yes. One thing's interesting, when I was an intern, they had these needles that you had to sharpen, and they had barbs on the end. It was nice when they got the needles that were sharp. They didn't do that. I always remember that. But then also the thing in terms of pulmonary, I'd say the ventilators. I put one guy in an iron lung type ventilator when I was an intern, actually, in Salt Lake. And I lasted about, well, a little over halfway through the night. And then I had to take him out. I couldn't stand it. And it didn't work. But it wasn't very good. But the ventilators really got a lot better. And so that was one thing. And then that was another thing. The other thing is, I'd say computers. You could do your pulmonary function studies much faster in terms of doing things with the computer. You know, one request when I came to La Crosse here to the clinic, they asked me what I wanted, if any one thing. Olivetti desktop computer. That was the one thing I got, and that was really good because I could really do the pulmonary function studies much faster that way. And I'd learned that over the previous year, so that was a good thing. And then the other thing would be in terms of the bronchoscopes. I did a lot of that, you know, on that, but they really improved, and they're even better now, you know.
Yeah, what are future challenges for that field? Do you see?
Oh, a lot of it's, you know, the things that are changing now a lot are you're going to be in genetics and stuff, you know, in terms of like, I'm still working in a sense of I go to the lung cancer conference every week. I set that up years ago, and genetics there is playing a big role among other things, but it's new in terms of the different drugs and different things that they're doing. So I don't know, it's hard to pick any one thing other than I think the gene stuff is really doing a lot in terms of that and some other problems.
We'll move on to, for a little bit and come back to a couple of things. Your involvement and leadership in both the hospital and clinic are beyond compare. Chief of Staff at Lutheran Hospital, Chairman of the Pulmonary Section, Outstanding Teacher of the Year, just to scratch the surface on your leadership involvement. What did these roles provide you with, and what are some of the more memorable moments?
Well, yeah, I ended up, I just pay my senses. Yeah, I was heading up so many things, it was crazy. I think you got most of those, but then that was local, just like I ended up president of the medical society in town shortly after I came, and then also then moved into state medical society, having involvement, and national heavy involvement, and a lot of this stuff was really something, you know. But I ended up in a lot of involvement with the American Thoracic Society, where I was, you know, their executive director or whatever, or stuff from this area to the national one all the time for years and stuff. But a lot of this stuff went on for a long time, you know. But there's so many different ones. I don't know what do you want me to focus on or anything, or?
Well, I was thinking, you know, if there was one that was particularly memorable, or
well, I did a number of things I think that are sort of memorable. I think one was I shortly after I came to town, I was getting called all the time by nursing homes because all the patients were sick, and then going to the nursing home, and I'd go see them, you know, and 2 o'clock in the morning and 3, whatever it was, I did. And even sometimes during the day, or if I had a break or something, I'd have to go or something. And eventually, what happened on that was I thought I'd get together and get somebody else to help, you know, in that regard. And I told them that I would take the nursing home that they didn't want if they, you know, some other internists, you know, and then they could have what they wanted, you know. They gave me the Gund home over by the university, but because nobody wanted that, so, but I didn't mind, you know, and so I went there. But then what happened in '76 is the Gund home moved into Bethany St. Joe's. Well, that was all right, so I got Bethany St. Joe's. Well, same thing happened again, sort of. They moved all their sick patients from elsewhere into Bethany St. Joe's, so I'm doing the same thing again, going there day and night and working, and I took this again for about 2 years, and then I thought, well, I got 3 other internists, and we worked up sort of a rotating schedule we could do to help that way. Also set up a ventilator unit up there at Bethany St. Joe's. Then the crazy part about that was that was because I had a guy here that in the hospital initially that had post-polio and was on the vent, you know, And initially I took care of him in the hospital, and I tried to get him to go to Bethany St. Joe's, and he went to his home hospital down the line. That lasted about a day, and then he came back and he said, well, I tried to talk him into Bethany St. Joe's, and so he went there. We became very good friends over the years. He lasted quite a few years, but then because of that I got started. But then what happened, other places around the state found out about this. What'd they do? The people that didn't have money, that needed ventilators and stuff, they sent them there over here. And so pretty soon I'm starting to get all these from over there. And then what we did is I put a stop to that. What I did was said that we'll just take this area and forget about these other ones coming in from the way out, you know.
Right.
So it was interesting. And I don't know, but it was kind of crazy, but
Rewarding?
good. Well, yeah, I thought so. I really I liked it. I liked the nursing home too deal, and just another thing that I picked up on. So then,
And how about local community involvement?
well, got that too. But do you want? You're interested in? I helped set up the cardiac rehab program at UWL. Not back in the early '70s. And then it ended up that I actually ended up writing a book with Phil Wilson and Joe Edgett and Gushik and another one. We wrote a book, and then it later published in Japanese even. But then after that I got talked into. I was going around the country for a few years there, back in the '80s or so. 70s, giving talks on cardiac rehab, even though I'd been involved more in pulmonary rehab before, but cardiac rehab. And during those, I mainly sort of posed as a cardiologist, which was a little sneaky, but then it worked, you know, because I'd go to Boston for that and lots of places, you know, that I gave talks with others. So it was interesting. But that was one of the things I got involved in. And the other thing is, for interest in the community, I was involved a lot with Western, or WWTC. I helped set up their respiratory therapist program way back in the early '80s, I think, and was teaching over there with them, some on the side too. And then actually, I've actually been on their board and still am for the last 25 years. So I'm still involved there too. So I don't know what else I'm thinking. Oh, I don't know.
You were a busy man.
Yeah, I served on the Wisconsin Respiratory Care Practitioner Examining Council for many, many years because of my involvement with respiratory therapy again. And then, I don't know, Secretary Treasurer and Wisconsin Thoracic Society, and I got that one. I got them admitted to the State Medical Society again. Did a lot of just odds and ends, you know, in terms of that, but was a lot involved with them too. So all these things I would sort of involved a lot in. What else? Oh, I also was involved a fair amount in smoking cessation too.
Were you teaching that, or was that at high school levels, or was it more for adults?
Yeah, more adults here, and I was on committees and stuff for that. Plus, I had articles in the paper periodically on that, among other things. And but that was a biggie too, sort of overall. And yeah, the one good one I got on that is I had this one teacher from up north of here a little bit that I'd see year after year, and he smoked. among other things. And I'd keep telling him, you should stop smoking, one thing. And finally, after about 10 years, he comes back and I ask him again, he's smoking. No. I said, you stopped? He said, yeah. I said, why'd you stop? Well, he said, you kept telling me that. I thought you must be serious. I'll never forget it though. But yeah, and I've had actually after I retired, I got some letters like a bunch of these people that had tried to change lifestyle that I really worked on in terms of weight loss, exercise, no smoking, and that sort of stuff. And I got a number of letters after I retired, and some of them were people I hadn't seen for 20, 25 years. And they said, sure glad I saw you way back then, because I changed my life, and it really worked, And that was really rewarding, I think.
Yes. There was a physician here. He's no longer here. He was a shorter guy, a pulmonologist. Do you remember him? Wasn't he foreign, maybe?
Oh, you mean Perez? Frank
No.
Perez?
No, it was somebody else. I saw him because I smoked for a long time, and I can't think of his name right now. I can see his face, but don't remember his name. I felt the same way that your patients were saying about you, that
Yeah.
it was a good thing.
Oh, it's interesting.
Well, moving on,
Okay.
you've had many, many awards and honors, including the 2008 Founders Award in Medical Education Leadership, and also large contributions to the advancement of medical education and research and community health initiatives. I'm sure that these awards and honors have meant a lot to you.
Yeah, and I think the medical leadership was a nice one, and also the one from I'm trying to think of it. I got a blank on it now.
Was that the major gift in support of endowing
Overholt?
our excellence campaign for medical education?
Yeah, the one for the Overholt one is the one I've funded.
That established the endowment for the internal medicine residency program.
Yeah. Yeah, that one I put a chunk of change into. Big, but it's good. I think I'm really big on the education and the teaching. I liked it.
Is that what motivates your support?
Yeah, and I think, like we talk, I thought, and this goes back even to Korea. When I was in Korea, those other physicians that were up there on DMZ, I tried to get together with them so we'd have learning sessions, of some sort. They thought I was nuts, I think. But anyway, they weren't really interested. But I thought, the only way to keep up is to learn, and the way to do that is to teach, because you teach, you learn. And Overholt was one who felt strongly that way. And he was really one that was a good mentor, I think, in terms of me too. But because he felt so much like me, and we got along really good together, I would say, in terms of that, in terms of the teaching and the other stuff. Because actually, when you teach like that, you don't just learn and what you teach them, but they'll teach you too. And if you don't realize that, you're not very smart.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of it. So the interaction was really great. And I used to tick off some of the rest, and even in the pulmonary section, because I was really a kind of a stinker in a way, and they make fun of me sometimes, but I had cards where I'd make up on each patient, when in a hospital. And I put down anything that was really significant on these cards and have them, and whenever we took overnight, somebody did or something, would pass off I had to have them pass off the cards. So you'd know all the patients that you're supposed to be following and anything pertinent, Well, I probably was the only one that really around doing that sort of stuff, but then they did it, and but it was good,
Yeah.
you know, and it worked. So I don't know, but yeah, I had a good time with it anyway. Don't know, but
Well, thinking back to your tenure at Gunderson, what would your colleagues say that you are known for?
I don't know. I wondered about that. I think the one thing would be that I would say that I was available. I mean, they'd call me anytime, day or night, I think, if they had a real problem, you know. And they knew that I'd respond. And that's true, and I did, and I didn't, it's all right. You know, maybe it's 2 o'clock in the morning again or whatever, but I spent so many nights here, it was ridiculous because I even continued to do the emergency room rotation for the first 15 years I was here. And on that was, I'd stay 24 hours solid, you know, in the emergency room. And sometimes I'd be working solid for 24 hours, and then I remember one time I did that, and then the next day I'd go into walk-in and work up until 5:30 in the evening or so. But yeah, you had one in here about things that you did wrong or whatever.
Oh, I don't think I asked that.
Bronchoscopy. Best day, worst day.
But, yeah. Did you,
I had one of those,
Did
sort
you?
of. But, well, I'd been up all night working, of course, and then I did bronchoscopy the next day on a lady. And I got about halfway through it, and I realized I was doing it on the wrong side. How I ever did this, you know, I don't know. But anyway, so I thought, well, rather than wake her up, I'd go ahead and do the right thing and get it done. And so I did, and did that. And then I waited till she woke up, and then I sat her down, talked to her, and I told her exactly what had happened and exactly what I did. She's real nice, and she didn't say anything, but luckily it turned out okay, you know. But that's, you know, they talk about if you don't sleep, you're going to be bad. That's the only time I can really think that I really did anything that was really Dumb and Dumber, other than if you are up a lot and you sit down and try to write a lot. That doesn't go so good. But I learned that early on, you know, but crazy. But, so,
patient that changed you, proudest day?
well, a good one was, I had a lot of them, I think, in terms of patients and things I did, you know, and how they came out, you know, and that was because, I don't know. Tell you one that was, well, I was always doing resuscitations too. Why? Because I'd make rounds early in the morning, late at night. And I'd be the one around, you know. And somebody would, they'd arrest, and so I was doing that a lot. But one time I was in the dining room at the hospital, and I was eating a little bit because I was going to go back and go to work. And, it was about 5 in the evening or something like that, and I heard a little commotion behind me. I looked around, and there's this guy on the floor, and he had actually come out of the room up above there, down in the one they did over a little bit, but now in the dining room, and collapsed and arrested. So I don't know, there happened to be a couple of nurses there, and they saw too, and we started in, we went to resuscitating him. We're working on him, resuscitating him, and of course there's a lot of people and they're watching, you know, and it was a tough resuscitation, you know, in terms of we shocked him, I don't know how many times, you know, one thing and another. But finally got him around, and I'm breathing with him and one thing and another, and then I was going to intubate him. I'll never forget this. Then there was an anesthesiologist, I guess, by that time, standing up here, and he said, no, I was going to intubate him. So he said, so I can intubate him, you know. And I said, I remember telling him, what do you think I do for a living? I'll never forget that. So I intubated him, but I mean, it was what I did for a living. But it was something, and he did survive. He was a board member, actually.
Oh.
Well known around here. And he's still alive today. We're good friends too, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow or other.
Well, you saved his life.
Yeah, I got a bunch of those. I had the first recess over to cardiac rehab program too, because I ended up sort of president of that thing over there for a while too, and I was attending over there for quite a few years, and then the first one that arrested over there was very interesting too, because that guy arrested, and I was the only one that really recognized it. So I got him down, and here I'm doing mouth to mouth and on his chest and one thing and another, and there was a machine there to defib, you know, and so I asked him to get it and tried. It didn't work. Found out later, well, I never hooked up, you know. But anyway, and then I'm messing around here for the longest time, but luckily then Phil Wilson happened to come up with a portable, and I ended up shocking him to get him back and took him over to St. Francis. He survived too, so that was, but I had a lot of recesses and stuff, but certain ones you can remember. And,
Mm-hmm.
but anyway, they were good.
How about the sleep lab? You included
Oh.
a photo. Tell us about that initiative.
Well, I actually, I ended up, I was four boarded. I was boarded in internal medicine, pulmonary, critical care, and then since I was doing all this nursing home and stuff, I studied up as I usually did, and went for the fourth one.
Gerontology.
No, I'm blocking out because I'm beginning to lose it here now. It's age. But well, let's see. Where were we otherwise? It'd be geriatrics would be the other one, I guess. That'd be the fourth, I think.
Right, internal medicine, pulmonary, critical care, geriatrics.
Yeah. But, well, the other thing is I set up the ethics committee, the first one in the hospital. That was back when I think it was when I was president of the hospital, or before. And then I was leading that committee, and then I turned that over to Bud Hammis when he came, and was always much involved in terms of that too, because of the things I was doing. Ooh.
What are you doing in retirement? And I was curious if you still had Dotsons.
Well, we did. When I was in Dallas, we found this dachshund, which was a very long leg, but he was really neat. He's smart, you know.
Yeah.
And we initially lived in Dallas in a rather risky area where they kept stealing my hubcaps and everything else that had happened. And then we moved out to Irving, Texas after the first year, I think. And that was nicer. And so we had him out there. And the interesting part about that was that my wife took him to dog school for a while, I think, and then took him to they had a big show, you know, and she took him, and he got first place with all these Dallas people. They were really ticked because they're really sort of high society, and we're low key, to say the least. But he was good. He was smart. But then, no, what happened was We've always had 1 to 3 dogs since it came up to lacrosse, and variety. But it ended up, as towards the end, we had collies, and right now I have 1 collie, and he's one of the neatest dogs. He's smart, but he's so likable. You couldn't help but like him, and he's the most pleasant dog I think ever had. You know.
I think collies are quite smart too, aren't they?
Oh yeah, he's smart. He knows what to do to please me and whatever, and he does. He obeys very well, and we get along just great. And it's just something. He's hard to believe. And what's interesting also is Dr. Jumonville, you know, moved in next door to us a year or so ago, a couple, and they got a dog, collie, which is distantly related to ours. They look almost identical, and they play together a few times every week, and it's really something.
Yeah.
But it's neat.
How back when you were growing up, how did you get involved with the Dachshunds at that point?
My dad had that going. I don't know how. I don't really comprehend how. It seemed a little unusual for him, but anyway, he did. And I ended up actually being the one that ended up taking care of them mostly. My other 2 brothers weren't that interested overall to that, but I was. So.
They're a neat little dog.
Oh yeah, I really liked them. And the only trouble is there that was bad is that, and we talk about this too, the one that was really my favorite, and I took him to a dog show and did good too, you know, at that time. And my dad sold him. Never did understand that, and it was a crazy thing to do.
Yeah.
Interesting experience.
Mm. Well, is there anything else you'd like to share that I haven't covered? Your retirement, grandchildren, what you like what you like to do in your retirement?
What I was doing, what I did when I retired initially, I went to the Indian Reservation, and I went to St. Clair, and I worked there until just a little year or so ago, and because it really went downhill, you know, in terms of patients, you know, but I was doing mainly pulmonary and sleep there. Mm-hmm. And then
the Indian Reservation out in South Dakota?
Yeah, went out there. That's neat, because that's probably the poorest place in the country, I think, without a doubt. When I came back, I read Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee. I hadn't read it before, but then actually when I was in Korea, there was an orphanage up near there in the DMZ too, and I would go there. I volunteered and went out there to try to help out whenever I could, you know, to take care of some kids, and I took some of them that were really bad down to Seoul to get taken care of too. But that was kind of good, and I actually learned how to speak some Korean too. Don't know any more now except for Apo. That's pain.
Oh. What do you see the future being for Pine Ridge?
I don't know. I'm not sure. Seems like it would get better. I haven't been out there for quite a while now, so, but I don't know. But
I'm from South Dakota.
Yeah.
And it seems as if it's just an endless process.
Yes.
Without an...
Well, yeah, it's interesting. You get out there and you see people walking, you know, everywhere, and then that kind of reminds you of Korea too. But the other thing is that they have cars maybe, but no gas. You know, it's really
Live in trailers that aren't hooked up to anything.
Oh no. Mm-mm.
Diane Sawyer did a very nice job of documentary on Pine Ridge that I thought was very compelling.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it would have been a couple of years ago.
Hmm.
Everybody I talk to that goes out there has a good experience. I mean,
Yeah.
enjoys going out there.
Well, I went out there with 8 women, nurses and stuff, and they had a big sort of trailer thing that they lived in, and that had some facilities to it. And they put, well, this first time they didn't ever go to a motel, and they put me down in sort of a cabin that had no electricity, no anything except I had a bed, and it was cold because I ended up, when I went, it was in late October. I remember I almost froze the first night, I thought, you know, and so I complained about it sort of bitterly. And what they did was they ran a long cord down there, and I got a little heater about this big, you know, that I put it by my face so face wouldn't freeze. But it worked, you know. And then, but they called me three dog Winga then, because there were three dogs and they had mange and stuff like that. But there's a big bench outside where I stayed, and they'd sleep out there at night, and one thing and another. It was crazy. Very interesting. Good experience, though.
In what sense? Just in what sense?
Well, I think it just like Korea for me was a good experience. I'm glad I went, and I didn't want to go in the first place. But once I went there, it makes you realize how fortunate you are. You don't appreciate, you know, how much you should appreciate things, I think, because we take so much for granted. I mean, we don't have to worry about much, you know. It's different, really different. And so, and that really sunk in when I was in Korea, but because, you know, well, I got over there and I asked them, how far is to the next camp? 45 minutes. Well, how far is to the next camp? 45 minutes. That's all they give me. And well, it wasn't very far, really, but it takes a while to get there, you know. But it was something, you know, and they would get around it, and they had these, they carry their stuff, you know, on their backs and heads that go up, and it amazed me how much they could do that, you know, but they did. And they'd walk, and so I don't know, but it's a different experience.
Were you ever afraid of losing your life? Or
yeah, well, when I got over there, we were on 24-hour alert for the first 3 months I was there. That's because they'd just killed somebody. And we thought, because it was a 10-year armistice, that they were coming down again. And so then the idea was that when the alarm goes off, grab your gun and get ready to go. And so I would. And it may be 2 o'clock in the morning or any time during the day or whatever. And we had that happen, you know, for off and on for the first 3 months, and then it settled down, sort of. But that's kind of scary, yeah. They actually took us out on a focus march one night in the dark, and I was sort of at the back of the troop, you know, as we're going along. And then there were some gunshots, and you know, supposedly were the fake attack on us, you know. The only thing that was disappointing about that is these younger fellows that were ahead of me, some were throwing their guns away and running. They were supposed to be the ones that were going to protect me, but I don't know about that. A little worrisome, but enlightening, I think, in the long term. I don't know.
Well, it sounds like you've got a couple of your kids are close, and you actually have a daughter working here, so you spend time with your grandkids. And
well, I was lucky, yeah, because I got 6 grandkids. Each one has 2, and so one lives in Twin Cities, and the other 2 are here in town. So the kids. And yeah, I've been very fortunate. I figured for sure it'd be one coast and the other coast. And I decided after I retired I didn't want to travel anymore, because I'd done so much traveling because of all these things I was involved in. I mean, I don't know how many times I was Canada, Boston, you know, and all these places on one coast, Hawaii a number of times, and all these meetings were something, but they were interesting, you know. Educational.
Things you could bring back,
yeah,
and share with your colleagues too.
Mm-hmm.
Well, anything else? If I missed anything, is there anything else that you'd like to talk about?
Well, I don't know. I probably bore you to death, so I don't know.
Well, that's all right.
Well, I don't know. I think the only thing is that I guess that I I really liked working. I think I was a little nuts, but I didn't mind like a lot of physicians do. You know, in terms of if I had to work all day, all night, I thought that was okay. Somehow or other, I really did. That's the honest to God truth. But I'd be tired, you know, somewhat. But you know, if you think about the people you're taking care of and one thing and another, it's a different story, you know. I figured my thought on life most of the time after I came here was I'd be really glad if I'd lived to 55. If something happened then, so be it. I figured by that time my kids would be grown up and things would be settled and it'd be okay. And why did I think that? That's because of what I was doing somewhat. You didn't know. I'll tell you one interesting case if you want, you know. I had this young lady who was probably in her mid to late 30s. She was a smoker. And she came in and she had lung cancer, a big lesion here and another lesion up here. Well, prognosis on that's not so good, you know. But, so she had chemoradiation therapy, and I followed her for probably about 5 years. And then she went back to her local physician down the line after that because it was going pretty good. She shows up actually 17 years from her original diagnosis and telling me, she's really apologetic. She says, "Oh, I'm so sorry." She says, I didn't smoke for 10 years and then I went back to smoking. And I said, "Oh, that's okay, that's all right, you know." But this time she had a lesion over on the other side. We treated that, but she still lived for another couple of years or more. But that's really something, you know. Now, you would have never thought that. And that's why, you know, I always told people, you know, that, yeah, I could give you approximations, but you don't know how long it's going to be, one way or the other. And that's the way it is, you know. And I had any people that, and I always say, anybody had a sense of humor that you could do this. I'd say, well, sure, hope you make it out the door, you know. So, but anyway.
Well,
Oh well.
certainly appreciate you coming in. Sometimes Jay has a question or two. Don't have any questions?
I bore you to death, but I'm sorry.
No, not at all. I mean, there was so much I could have covered. You know, I mean, you just have such a exceptional career.
I got involved in so much stuff, you know. But I liked it. Yeah, it's fun.